There was a time when you stepped back from the world, not because you were weak, not because you had nothing to offer, but because something inside you needed protection. As an empath, you absorb more than most people realize. The noise, the expectations, the projections, the hidden tensions, it all accumulates. And at some point, retreat becomes survival. From the outside, it may have looked like you disappeared. Maybe people said you changed. Maybe they assumed you were isolating out of fear of failure. But what they couldn't see was the internal rebuilding taking place. You weren't escaping the world. You were detoxing from it. Isolation was not your collapse. It was your incubation. In that quiet space, you began to hear your own thoughts again, not the opinions of others, not the subtle pressure to perform or please, just your own voice. And at first, that silence may have felt uncomfortable. When you're used to constant emotional stimulation, stillness can feel unfamiliar. But slowly, clarity replaced chaos. You started recognizing where your energy had been leaking. You saw how often you had overextended, how often you had dimmed yourself to maintain harmony, how often you had confused empathy with responsibility for everyone else's emotional state. That awareness required distance. Retreat gave you perspective. It allowed you to separate what was truly yours from what you had been carrying for others. You began to understand that not every problem required your intervention. Not every conflict needed your mediation. Not every emotional storm was yours to calm. And in that realization, strength returned. The world may value constant output, constant visibility, constant engagement. But creative and spiritual renewal often happen in solitude. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. And your retreat was exactly that underground growth. You were shedding old identities, releasing outdated dynamics, relearning your boundaries, reconnecting with your creative pulse without external interference. The retreat was not the end of your story. It was the preparation for your return. Because when an empath withdraws consciously, they don't come back fragile. They come back aligned. Pain has a way of either distorting your vision or refining it. For a long time, you may have feared that what you went through would harden you, silence you, or disconnect you from your creative spirit. When betrayal happens, when envy surfaces, when your depth is misunderstood, it can feel like something sacred inside you has been damaged. But what if it wasn't destroyed, only purified? Before the pain, your creativity may have flowed freely but without boundaries. You gave ideas energy and inspiration without always discerning who deserved access. You created from openness, but sometimes without protection. And when that openness was exploited or dismissed, it stung deeply. It made you question your sensitivity. It made you question your gift. Yet pain has a sharpening effect. It teaches discernment. It forces reflection. It asks you to look at where you were overgiving, where you were seeking validation, where you were tying your creative expression to someone else's approval. That process is uncomfortable. It feels like loss at first, like something has been taken from you. But in reality, something unnecessary is being stripped away. The betrayal did not kill your vision, it clarified it. You no longer create to be accepted. You no longer share to be validated. You no longer dilute your voice to make it easier for others to digest. The fire that once flickered with uncertainty now burns with intention. Pain refines focus. You start to see that not everyone is meant to understand your depth. Not everyone is meant to walk beside you during every phase of growth. And instead of shrinking to fit smaller spaces, you expand into spaces aligned with your evolution. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. Your creativity shifts from reactive to deliberate. It is no longer fueled by proving yourself. It is fueled by expressing truth. The wounds did not silence your spirit. They removed the noise around it. And when you return to the world, you return differently. Not naive, not guarded in fear, but grounded. Your vision is clearer because it has been tested. Your creativity is stronger because it has survived disappointment. Your voice is steadier because it no longer depends on applause. The pain did not end your creative spirit. It refined it into something unshakable. There was a time when your energy was constantly flowing outward. You were available, responsive, understanding. You showed up for people even when you were exhausted. You listened when no one listened to you. You gave advice, comfort, creativity, solutions. And slowly, without realizing it, you began to feel drained. Not because you were weak, but because there were no boundaries protecting your output. Empaths often don't notice energy depletion immediately. You are wired to care. You feel responsible when someone is struggling. You sense emotional shifts before words are spoken. So you step in. You absorb, and over time, that absorption becomes heavy. Reclaiming your energy begins with awareness. You start noticing which conversations leave you inspired and which leave you exhausted, which environments expand you and which shrink you, which people reciprocate and which only receive. That awareness can feel uncomfortable because it challenges old patterns of loyalty and obligation. But renewal requires honesty. The moment you realize that constantly giving does not equal love, something shifts. You understand that empathy without boundaries becomes self-neglect. And you begin pulling your energy back, not in anger, but in alignment. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming intentional. You stop answering every call. You stop fixing every problem. You stop overextending to maintain connection. You let people manage their own emotional growth. And in doing so, you free up space inside yourself. That space is where creativity returns. When your energy is no longer scattered across draining dynamics, your mind becomes clear. Your body feels lighter. Your ideas flow without resistance. The creative spirit that once felt blocked begins to breathe again. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They ensure that what enters your life aligns with your capacity and purpose. And when you protect your energy, you are not rejecting the world, you are preparing to re-enter it with strength. Reclaiming your energy is the turning point. Because the moment you stop leaking power into places that cannot honor it, you become focused, grounded, intentional. And from that grounded state, creation becomes effortless again. For a long time, your sensitivity may have felt like a burden. You felt everything, the subtle shifts in tone, the unspoken tension in a room, the sadness behind someone's smile. While others seemed unaffected, you carried layers of emotional data that no one else acknowledged. And at times, you probably wished you could turn it off. Because sensitivity without understanding feels overwhelming. But the renewal of your creative spirit begins the moment you stop viewing your depth as a flaw. What once felt like overthinking is actually perception. What once felt like emotional overload is actually awareness. You are not too much. You are finely tuned. Sensitivity is not fragility. It is precision. It allows you to notice details others overlook. It helps you sense patterns before they fully form. It gives you access to emotional textures that become powerful fuel for art, leadership, healing, and innovation. The very thing that once exhausted you becomes the source of your creative advantage. The shift happens when you learn to regulate rather than suppress. Instead of absorbing everything unconsciously, you begin filtering consciously. You understand that you can observe emotion without owning it. You can witness pain without carrying it. That boundary transforms sensitivity from chaos into clarity. And clarity feeds creation. When you stop apologizing for your depth, your expression becomes more authentic. You write differently. You speak differently. You lead differently. There is nuance in your voice. There is humanity in your ideas. There is resonance in your presence. People feel that. Because in a world that often operates on surface level interaction, depth stands out. Emotional intelligence becomes leadership. Compassion becomes strategy. Intuition becomes foresight. The creative spirit thrives when you stop fighting your nature. Instead of trying to toughen yourself into numbness, you strengthen yourself into stability. You accept that your nervous system processes more, and you design your life around that truth. You protect your rest. You curate your environment. You choose aligned connections. And suddenly what once drained you begins to empower you. Sensitivity was never the problem. The lack of boundaries was. Now that you understand how to manage your depth, you no longer see it as something to hide. You channel it. You refine it. You build with it. And when an empath learns to harness their sensitivity instead of resisting it, their creative spirit doesn't just return. It expands beyond anything it was before. There was a time when your creativity was fueled by survival. You created to be seen. You expressed to be validated. You gave your ideas your energy, your emotional depth in hopes that someone would recognize your worth. Even if you didn't consciously admit it, part of your output was tied to proving something, proving you mattered, proving you were valuable, proving you were enough. And that kind of creativity, while powerful, is exhausting. When you create from woundedness, there is urgency behind it. There is pressure. There is a quiet fear of being overlooked. You may overwork, overproduce, or overextend because your sense of self is intertwined with the response you receive. Applause feels like oxygen. Silence feels like rejection. But renewal begins when you detach your identity from the reaction. As you healed, something shifted. You stopped creating to fill an emotional void. You stopped performing your depth for approval. You began asking yourself a different question. Not, will they like this? But, does this feel true to me? And creating from wholeness feels different. It is slower but stronger. It is quieter but more grounded. You no longer rush to release every idea. You nurture it. You protect it. You refine it because it reflects alignment, not insecurity. Wholeness removes desperation. You don't chase validation because you are no longer starving for it. You don't fear criticism the same way because your sense of worth is not hanging in the balance. You create because it is natural to you. because expression is part of your being, not a strategy for acceptance. This is the rebirth of the creative spirit. When you are no longer trying to prove yourself, your work becomes more authentic. There is clarity in your message. There is calm in your delivery. There is intention in your presence. People feel the difference because you are no longer creating from lack. You are creating from overflow. And overflow is power. It attracts without force. It inspires without manipulation. It resonates because it is rooted in truth. You are not creating to be chosen anymore. You are creating because you have already chosen yourself. And when creativity flows from that place of inner stability, it becomes sustainable, magnetic, and deeply transformative, not just for others, but for you. When the empath returns to the world, it is not dramatic. There is no announcement, no need to prove anything. The transformation is internal first. You walk differently. You speak differently. You choose differently. And even if no one can immediately explain what changed, they feel it. Before, your presence may have been scattered, generous but unprotected, expressive but seeking reassurance. Now it is grounded. You are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You are no longer bending your frequency to fit every room. You enter spaces with awareness, not absorption. The return is quiet, but it is powerful. You don't feel the urge to overshare. You don't rush to rescue. You don't volunteer your energy where it hasn't been earned. There is a calm discernment in you, a steadiness. And that steadiness shifts the atmosphere. People notice when someone is no longer seeking approval. They sense when your smile is not a performance, when your silence is not insecurity, when your boundaries are not negotiable. You are not louder, you are clearer. And clarity carries authority. This version of you does not fear disconnection the way the old version did. You understand that not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Some were part of the retreat. Some were part of the lesson. And now, you are aligned with a different level of interaction. Your creativity reflects this maturity. You don't chase attention. You build substance. You don't compete for visibility. You focus on impact. The need to prove has dissolved into a desire to contribute. And that shift makes your presence magnetic in a different way. When you re-enter the world after intentional withdrawal, you bring depth without heaviness. You bring empathy without self-abandonment. You bring vision without desperation. The world responds differently because you are operating differently. You are no longer reacting, you are choosing. No longer absorbing, you are observing. No longer chasing, you are attracting. And that is the real transformation. The empath's return is not about reclaiming old spaces. It is about entering new ones with alignment. So it is about moving through the world with a creative spirit that is protected, refined, and intentional. You didn't come back louder. You came back stronger.